Hello, and welcome back to this episode of Pros and Content. My name is Ellen Schwartz. I'm Senior Director of Demand Generation here at Notch, and I'm really thrilled to welcome Camille Trent. You are Head of Content at Dooley. You also host your own podcast, Content Logistics. But how are you doing?
I'm doing well. You caught me on a Friday, so I feel like that's smart. I try and do my podcast on Fridays as well.
Excellent. So can you tell us just a little bit about yourself and your role at Dooley and your role at Content Logistics?
Yeah, so role at Dooley, Head of Content Marketing specifically. So came on about a year ago, and then we built out the team a bit from there. So it's changed like over the year, but it's been a combination of event, brand, SEO, social, all of the things, right? Like the thing that I say all the time is content is all of the things, right? Like when someone tries to ask, what is content marketing? Well, like anything that has like words and pictures and that someone can consume, usually falls under content marketing. And then I think a good way to think about it too is with demand generation, some of the copy portion will fall more under demand, depending on how the team's set up. But demand typically handles more of the distribution, especially paid distribution. So when people ask, like, that's kind of how I explain it, and that's kind of how it works at Dooley. And then Content Logistics, I host, it's actually Motion's podcast, but worked with them to set the strategy on it. And I basically set up every episode as a masterclass, like a masterclass in a specific content play. And so ideally you should be able to scroll through, find like a play that you're looking to level up on and deep dive onto that.
Yeah, I like the way that you have it set up. It's really, I think, it's set up a bit more by topic and by something where if you understand what you're looking for, you can find it.
Yeah, it's interesting that you put it that way. It's almost like not trying to be SEO, but you're trying to be indexable, right?
Yeah, and I think it's helpful then to structure the episode topic. It's you have something to talk about. You're not just saying, I'm going to talk to you about content marketing, because as you said, that doesn't narrow it down very much.
Yeah, just try and do the editing as much as you can for your audience. Like that's another core pillar we might get into in the show as well.
Awesome. Yeah. So kind of diving into your role as head of content, I know we here at Notch love to be strategic. We love to understand what's going on. So what is it that you take into consideration kind of on the day-to-day as you do your job?
Yeah. So things that I factor into to make the right decisions. So I think thinking about that way, especially when you're first setting the foundation of what are we doing here? What would our audience be doing here? Like literally, what are they trying to get done? And then from there, ranking those things, right? Like how painful is that problem that needs to be solved? And then how relevant is your solution to solving that problem, right? Is basically a 1, 2, 3, right? So typically like 3 being it has like high relevance for your product. What are the things that we can help you with now? Whereas if you read this and we plugged ourselves, I guess, in the right way, that it would be a good match and you just understand that like we can solve your problem. So I think going through that exercise like helps you focus on like here's some of the foundational things that we need to get done. And then we can sort of work up the funnel from there. That's one way that I think about it. I think the hardest thing with startups is you just have limited data. And so it's really hard because you want to like, okay, show me the data. Let's dig into the data. Let's see what's working and what's not working. But typically you're basically starting from scratch, right? You have very limited data. But that being said, some ways that you can speed up your insights for content are with something like paid ads. So another thing that I'll do is I'll look at some of the search terms that are converting or that are doing well, and then use those insights for organic. So for instance, Salesforce notes, right? Salesforce notes is like what our whole this is obvious, but it's like what our product was built on. And then we expand it out to some other different features and products and things. But knowing that page like on our site converts pretty well, and then also knowing the paid ad insights from that and pulling that out and saying, okay, like there's enough evidence like that we should probably go deeper into this topic.
So just to summarize, I think it sounds like always start with the customer in mind, always understand what they're trying to solve for, if it is that they've come to your product or to your site, and then go from there. So after that, it's a bit of understanding what metrics really matter and well, I guess to back up one further, what metrics do you have to work with? what content are you working with, and how do you understand if it's converting, if it's actually accomplishing a business goal?
Yeah. And to clarify too, I felt like I dove right into the, okay, day to day now, but there is like backing up to some of that early stage. There's nothing that beats, and I keep relearning this, like just talking to a few customers, and specifically like the customer that is an ideal fit customer, right? Like the type of logo that you want, that is the right price point for where you want to go, that is the right role within that logo, right? There's a lot of factors that can, if you get them wrong, skew the data in the wrong way. So talking to more of the right fit customers and finding out what they like about the product, or even how they think about the product, makes a big difference, and it can lead you in a different direction. So doing a lot more of that to start, just to wrap your brain around what it is you're doing. And not just doing things to do things. That's a lesson I have to keep relearning. But just had like a customer interview a few weeks ago that was like breakthrough, or like it feels that way every time. Yeah. You're like, wow, like I got so much out of this, like so many pull quotes, so many just direction that either reinforces what you're already doing, or it's like, no, we need to go a different way. So talk to customers.
Yeah. I think what is interesting to me too is, so the kind of second half of your original point was that you can tie this all to results that matter. So is there a way that you are specifically approaching attribution to the content that you're creating? What are you looking at to know that what you're putting into the world is the right direction?
Yeah. So again, when you're in the startup phase, you don't have a lot of that data. You probably don't even have a lot of attribution set up. And so I would recommend setting that up as soon as possible, and hiring someone in RevOps, or learning yourself to set up some of the basics so that you have the insights, so that in a year from now, you're not struggling with the same things. And so wish that we did some of this earlier, but we did like pretty recently set up self-reported attribution, right? So we do that on the product side and the demo side. So on the product sign-up side, option for how did you hear about us? And then same thing with the demo, how did you hear about us? And then we also, the other two things that I look at that are helpful are Google Analytics. So it shows you a little bit of that customer journey. And big caveat here is that, it'll show you a couple of the pages before they converted, right? Before they hit request a demo. That does give you a little bit into the mindset of like what types of things make a good case for your product, right? Or have convinced this person who's probably already pretty convinced to get to this point to take that next step. So that's helpful in understanding what you need more of for that funnel. And then the other piece is just Salesforce, right? So your Salesforce or your HubSpot data, and setting up a dashboard there, and then comparing the attribution, right? Comparing all of those different things to see like what content is influencing, and that's more what you're going to get from a Google Analytics, and then what content is converting, like is getting them across the line, and then what content is filling in the rest of it, right? What are the other 10 touch points that we can't totally see, right? But you might give us some indication when you fill out that form field. So those are some things. And then on what we're measured on, so pipeline and revenue is like, you should kind of just be thinking about business goals in general, right? Everyone's moving in the right, to get everyone moving in the right direction, there should be transparency on what the business goals are and a plan to get there. So those are the top things that we look at in past orgs. And I do think this is somewhat helpful. There's been a little bit of like waterfall metric, right? Where it's like, this is the number of MQLs, then MQL to SQL to SQO, then meetings booked, and then even capacity of the sales team. So those are all kind of metrics that you can look at as well, because it is good to track funnel health.
So I'm guessing at this point, it might feel basic to you, that all mixes together, that all aligns in a way that makes sense. I'm wondering if someone's just starting out, what does that look like? How do you begin to tie your marketing to your RevOps?
Yeah, that's a good question. So become good friends with your head of RevOps in my case, nice. Right? He's much more technical and familiar with Salesforce than I. And so So she has helped like put together some of the campaigns, for instance, for tracking the success of campaigns and then setting up those dashboards, right? So we have one for sales, one for marketing, working with them on what are the types of things that you would need to see to get those insights to get better, right? And so working on setting up what needs to be in those dashboards, also working with leadership on what they want to see. I think you have to marry all those things. It's not just what you want to see, it's obviously what leadership needs to see and report up to the board. So I think that's mostly my answer, is work with someone smarter than me to work out some of those things on the reporting side, but also don't use that as an excuse of like, oh, I need RevOps to do something. Start to get familiar with whatever platform you're working on. So, my competency in Salesforce has gone way up since working here. I really wasn't familiar with it in the past. We'd used HubSpot at a previous company. And so just going in there and playing with the filters, and the different tabs. But I think especially reports, dashboards, and campaigns, like those are the main tabs, I guess, that I go into there, and then part off for email and just making sure I'm aware of how to kind of evaluate email. And there I more look at it from a brand standpoint of deliverability and average open rates, right? Like it kind of tells you the health of the brand to some degree of, do people want to hear from me when we're sending things out? Are they eager to see what we sent, right? Or to read? And then that's a lot of qualitative feedback there too, of are we getting DMs on LinkedIn of people complimenting the content or people sharing about it, right? So aggregating some of those things even for the reports like makes it a more accurate report in a lot of ways too. Like it shows things that the numbers aren't going to show. So looking at something like email from an open rate standpoint, it's more on the brand. And then obviously from a conversion rate standpoint, that's more on the growth marketing side. But a lot of what I'll do is just look at, do people like us on the email side?
Yeah. Are there specific metrics that you and your rev team align to as something that's very agreed upon and established ahead of time when it comes to measuring what you're doing is working?
Yes. I mean, this comes back, I think, to that dashboard side, right? And so that was a little bit earlier stage of coming together with, it was mostly VP of marketing, head of growth, me, and then RevOps, and like what those dashboards should look like, what types of things that we want to measure. It's also kind of a beginning of the year. Are we going to do OKRs, KPIs, both? And what are those going to be at the marketing level, right? And so aligning on those with the full team, just knowing that you're not stuck with that dashboard forever. I think sometimes we're like, this is a dinosaur legacy thing now. I can always change it and add. And I think that was a decent example of, just because we hadn't had self-reported attribution in the past, or because we're mainly going to be able to, we won't be able to pull from it for a lot of these reports, doesn't mean that we shouldn't have it. So I think also going the extra mile and taking all of that information I think ideally monthly is what I did. Was it's not standardized like that information. So going through and kind of trying to standardize that and then compare it to what you're getting from other sources, what you're getting from like an attribution tool or what you're getting from Salesforce, and just see do these things match up? And if they don't, can I better understand what that buyer's journey is and to make content?
That's what I was just going to dig into a bit. If you're doing the self-reported attribution, what happens when you have a tool that's saying, I've got data that, I have data that's tying this back to certain things, but your self-reported attribution is really not matching, or something doesn't add up? Are you giving different weight to different places? What's the relationship there with the different data that's kind of reporting on the same thing?
Yeah. Well, and a good example too is, in some cases, you might see that something's coming in from LinkedIn. Well, is that organic LinkedIn? Is that a paid ad? Like sometimes having a few different sources will help clarify that, of how are we using this channel effectively, or are we using this channel effectively, right? So another, I think, good example for us is if someone says they're coming from Instagram we don't do a lot of work on organic Instagram. We did some work, but most likely like that is coming from a partner that we work with on Instagram too, right? And so if you were to show that to someone else in the company, they might not realize, oh, this is coming from a partner, or at least the distribution from that partner is helping people see that content, right? So they might not put that whole story together. So just being really clear on what you're doing in that channel as well.
Got it. All right. So you've looked at some attribution, you understand a lot about what's working with your content and some of these metrics. How are you reporting that up within your company or out? You just hit on this a little bit. So we're making sure people have pieced together the right bits of data to tell the correct story, not just the story that they think they see. How is it that you're socializing this, democratizing this? I think there's lots of buzzwords we could plug in here. How do you share what it is that you're doing and whether or not it's working? All of those things.
Yeah, that's a good question. It goes back to those reports, like, and helping with easy data, right? So like me, a lot of other people aren't very familiar with Salesforce. So I think sharing it in a weekly, we do a weekly marketing meeting where we go over those metrics and how we're pacing toward them. So it's literally just a screenshot of that dashboard. But also, again, letting people know that this is a public dashboard. You can go into it, right? Helping people sort of self-serve a little bit if they want more information on the data, just being really transparent. Another thing that I've started doing is a Loom video where I walk through what I see as some of the insights in Google Analytics, and then same thing with Salesforce. And sometimes like I'll also go over the how did you hear about us too. So I'm experimenting with that, but I've sent a few of those videos out and got some good feedback from the revenue team, right? So like revenue leadership, and I have a recap like that. I think even better is to have like a TLDR, right? Like X, Y, and Z. You don't have to watch the Loom video if you don't want. And then yeah, same kind of similar thing for the team, but we'll do it more in a meeting setting of how are we pacing to goal, right? So I think that a regular stand-up like that is helpful.
Yeah. And I think what's interesting about both the Loom and the TLDR is those are both really short form. So at the bottom of this is simplifying it all for your audience, and or knowing your internal audience and understanding what's important to them. What do they need to know? How can you convey it in a way that they'll consume it?
Yeah. So for instance, I like to have all the data and the details. I would like you to tell me, like, not always, but the full story behind something. I can kind of also come up with my own conclusion and validate your conclusion. Then for most executives, and farther, I think you go up in leadership, you want that short form, right? You're like, just edit for me, right? It goes back to like editing for your audience. And so knowing that is still a work in progress, I think, to always do that and to always translate it that way. But that's a pretty good rule of thumb, is the higher up you go in leadership, like the shorter your like communications should be in a lot of ways.
I'm pretty direct a lot of times. That's what I've had to learn, is I feel the need to explain myself in ways that are really unnecessary sometimes, to where it's like, at this point in my career, it's like you're hired to do a job because you've proven you can do it. So could you just do your job? And so finding the filter or the edit or the whatever makes sense to say, here's what we saw, here's what we're going to do next. And then having, like, if you want to dig in, I can. It's just really hard for me to self-edit like in that way. So it's a good lesson and a good thing to be aware of. So yeah. I'm going to change the subject just a little bit and ask you, because the way I know about you is on LinkedIn. You're posting a lot, you're creating a lot of content there for Dooley. Do you think that you, even though you're a content marketer, you're slowly shifting into more of a demand generation role?
Yeah, so I think I've always been a person that's wanted to conquer, like to be a completist, I guess, is maybe like the completionist. Okay. That's bad if I'm a content marketer. I'm not using the right term. I
put you on the spot. We'll catch it in editing.
It was content though, like when it was, okay, I want to sort of conquer content. It was, okay, I need to at least have a pretty good understanding of SEO and social and email and direct response copywriting. I wanted to kind of master all of those things. And that's mainly been the goal, was to get to this point of like content leadership and content strategy is still probably my sweet spot and a favorite place to work. But that being said, I think more and more of content needs to be data driven. And there's a part of me that in school, for instance, I studied advertising and I was a TA for a research class. And I realized that I was the only person in my advertising class that liked the research part, right? Like that liked the stats. And so I think taking note of some of those things that that are unique of, okay, this overlap of liking data and also liking the copywriting creativity strange and like maybe something that I should think about or lean into. And basically the deeper and deeper I've gotten into my career, the more and more I'm interested in data. So it's kind of like naturally led me to do more of that type of work. And then also from circumstances, it's like we needed someone to fill in for that. And so it's partly been out of necessity and then partly been out of curiosity and personality. But yeah, I basically, as a marketer, I always wanted to round out as a marketer. And I think early on, growth marketing was probably the weakest spot. I had some experience in product marketing, just working with other product managers as a copywriter, and then rounded out more in the content marketing space. And then it was really just, okay, now growth marketing is the next thing to conquer. And I found that I liked growing things. And that's part of the battle. And then liking the statistics part and having thought about going back to school for analytics or statistics was a piece of it too. So yeah, answer question TBD, but I do enjoy some parts of marketing. I don't know that I would ever go into a full-time purely growth role, but I think all content marketers should think like a growth marketer, especially in like early stage startup space. You're doing content marketing, you have to kind of make your bets count.
Yeah, when you first started out with this answer, I was feeling like it was very much, you've understood content, you understood the meat of what you're putting out. And then the next step, if you were to kind of follow that piece of content through its life cycle, would be to understand what it's doing for the business. Because I think you mentioned that it's a partnership between you and your demand gen marketer, is that you are doing a lot to create the content, to have the right messaging for your audience, and they do a lot to promote it, to put it out in the world, to make sure that people are seeing what it is that you're creating. So I don't know if it was something where you can tell me you completely disagree. It's like, is it the next, as you mature as a content marketer, is that a natural next step if you feel like growing your career in that direction?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple different tracks you can go and still progress in your career as a content marketer. Progress is very relative, right? I think once you find a place where you're really happy and you have the balance that you want, leaning into that. And so there's two like major paths, I think, if you want to sort of keep going up the corporate ladder, if that's kind of your goal. And so one would be if you really want to lean into just the pure content side, you could stay a creator and you can go up to a senior position, and you could get, you wanted to increase pay, you could just go to a bigger company, right? There's that option. And then it's kind of the same thing if you want to stay in content management. I've seen a few different content marketers go into growth, and I think this is a little bit more common in the startup space. And I've seen it put this way. I think this is smart of different types of early stage marketers to hire and to basically look for a crossover. So you want someone who is strong in two of the three main marketing areas. So there's product, content, growth. And so I think knowing like what are the two that you're most strong in, or if it's just one, like what other skill can you add to be pretty strong in two? And that just puts you in a good position to be flexible and to try different roles if you get bored in one role. So I've seen that happen a few times, and usually it is the people that are a little bit more data driven, consider themselves like content people, but data driven content folks. So finding your sweet spot and both what you like to do and what you are good at, and just in realizing that just because you can do something, if it doesn't give you energy or you don't like it, doesn't mean you have to do that. Or those are a few different career paths for people.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. I think we That's a great note to end on. Is just kind of something to aspire to, or for people to chew on while they're thinking about their content careers. So that means we've approached the lightning round. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay. So the first one, it's a little heavy, but what keeps you awake at night as a content marketer?
Yeah, I mean, that's an easy one. It's my son gets up when he gets up throughout the night. It's been a while now, but we would take off like the railing on his bed to like turn his crib into a bed, right? So the first little bit, he was getting up throughout the night, and he still sometimes remembers that he can't just like walk out of his room and if he wants and be like, "Hey, Dad, I want to play video games with you." So him primarily. Out of that, it's always, what are we going to do next, right? Like, what's the next way that we're going to grow? And then just prioritizing tasks of now thinking about best structure for the team. And I guess a lot of what keeps me up at night is, does everyone on the team like feel satisfied, and do they have like the balance in work, right? Of the things that we have to get done, and then that might be boring, and then also the things that give them energy. So are they doing enough on the innovation side, like, and are we doing enough as a marketing team to innovate and do new things, like versus just repeating like the same plays over and over? Find that balance at like the team level, but then also the individual level.
Well, that was inadvertently a really good segue into my next question, which is there a campaign that you would run again, or is there a campaign that you point to that you feel is a really strong one that you would run again?
Oh, interesting. So this is a good question, because I just talked about purposing content like earlier this week. So it's a little bit still top of mind. So at the individual ad or like post or article level, yes, right? Like you should, this is where data comes in too, right? You can repurpose your best things, and whether that's a social post or whether that is an SEO article, repurposing your greatest hits is never a bad idea. Some of the thing you quoted to me, my own post, was from a year or so ago. I reposted it, and it helps me like revisit, because I think I changed some things about it, right? Like your thinking evolves, and you change some things like, as you go, and you sharpen up how to explain something. You get better at explaining your point of view. So I think repurposing, but also revisiting like some of that type of work. And then at more of the campaign level, there's some campaigns that I'm really proud of and that served a good purpose at that stage, right? But a lot of them were more brand awareness and credibility. So we had some fun campaigns around our status with G2, right? That we still get quoted back to us and that we're memorable enough. And so paying attention to what's sticky, right? What kind of like sticks around for a long time, and what can people sort of band around both internally and externally. But I wouldn't run like the same campaigns. And I do think you should sort of evolve in terms of, okay, this helped us get to this level. You know, how do we need to like rethink about what we want to get out of this campaign based at the stage that we're at now? Like what types of projects do we need to work on? How big of swings do we need to take at this stage? So in that way, I wouldn't repurpose any campaigns, but I would repurpose content for different campaigns.
Yeah, I think what I heard there too is that a campaign, it's really a good idea to bring in campaigns that have worked, but you can't just sit there and say, right, run it again. You need to understand why it worked. You need to see if there's anything that could be improved. Like, what is it that you should do next? How should you evolve that? Not just hit repeat and hope that you get the same results, because it's likely you won't.
Yeah. You know, actually, there's two other things I can add to this, in that we did do or start up.
You only get one. Sorry.
Okay.
I'm kidding. Keep going.
No, I was going to respect the rules if you needed. But so Fire Talks, like we did a season 1 and then we did a season 2 for a reason, but we did want to rethink about, again, like the purpose of why we're doing it, and adding a little bit more structure, or making sure that there is like a topic that relates back to what we do, our product, because the purpose at this stage, it can't just be brand awareness, right? And so having it relate a little bit back to our product, and thinking about the different ways that we can repurpose. So those are kind of one way that campaign evolved. And then I think another one that I guess I would do again, that I think more as a program than a campaign, is is a report. So I would do a like sales productivity report again, or like a sales happiness report that we did. So that's a good one to run back.
Yeah, I've heard that one a couple of times, is using your own data to find insights for your industry is going to win most of the time. You're going to find some of the people who have kind of been in the periphery and saying, I'm ready, but I don't have a good reason to kind of take the leap into your product. So I like it.
Totally.
Okay, so where's the best place you've traveled?
Yeah, that's a good question. There's a few places that I really liked. I went to Ireland this summer, so that one's top of mind. So I'm just I'll stick with that. That was a lot of fun. I went with all some of my good friends, my old college roommates, and we did a girls trip. So
amazing.
No family, and it's been a while, like been years since we all got together. Some of them live in Europe, and so I don't get to chat with them too much. So that was a lot of fun, and it's beautiful. It was good. It was a good time to go. So I'll go with Ireland.
High quality content when you can combine all of those things. Nice.
Oh yeah, it was the trip, like even more so than the place, I would say.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And the people you were with. That's incredible. I'm glad you got to do that. That's wonderful. Okay, so what is your pandemic cliche?
Pandemic cliche. Earlier this week, I was on a webinar and I still got called out for being on mute. So I don't know how I've gotten this far in life and still had a job in tech while still being on mute more times than I would like to admit.
Fair enough. Yeah, I do feel like if we're in this business of hosting things too, I think that's a bit of like salt in the wound almost. Like that's almost some days your job is actually knowing to come off mute. Sorry.
That's my number one priority, I think, for every day. It's just, this is going to be the day where I have no tech troubles. I'm just good at technology.
Okay. I really wish you well in that endeavor. I hope you succeed someday. Thank you. Thank you so much, Camille. It has been really great to chat with you today. Final question is just, what would you like people to take away from this podcast? This particular episode, I guess the whole thing is on me, but this episode.
Yeah, I think I'd just love for people to have a few more ideas on how they can measure content. At the end of the day, it's very hard to prove your role as a content marketer. So I feel that, and I hope this gives you a few more just tools for your toolkit that you can use for attributing your success, your team's success, and ultimately just moving the business forward. So that's what I'd hope people take away.
I like that a lot. If people would like to connect with you, where can they find you?
Yeah, the best place is still probably LinkedIn. I have been less active there than I've been last year, for instance, but I'm still pretty good about responding to DMs. And then the Dooley page, you can find some of my content, some of our team's content. So shameless plug there, but those are the two best places.
I don't know if I appreciate it. I think I may be a bit embarrassed that you're saying that you've really slacked off on LinkedIn. And I think you do about 10 times as much as I do. So thanks for that.
Repurposing. I've gotten a little bit lazier, but a little bit smarter, I guess, in sort of hitting a cadence or something, a less consistent cadence.
Very good. Well, thank you again so much. And to our listeners, thank you for spending time with us. If you haven't yet, be sure to subscribe to Pros and Content wherever it is that you found us. This season, digital growth and demand gen marketers are sharing how they use audience journey strategy and metrics to accelerate business growth. Thank you so much, Camille. It's been really great.
Thanks, Ellen.